It's my absolute pleasure to once again be speaking with Glen Grant, who worked as defense and reform expert in Ukraine, working for the Ukrainian Institute for the Future. He is a senior fellow in the UK Institute for Statecraft on Building Integrity Initiative, countering Russian influence. He graduated from the Royal Military Academy at Sandhurst, the Junior Staff Course Warminster, and the Joint Staff Defence College at the Royal Naval College in Greenwich. Hopefully, I got all that correct. We have spoken before, so if you get value from this interview, please do check out our previous conversations on the channel. And of course, we are speaking at an absolutely critical time of the war. Before I jump in, please do check out at the end of the video a short insert we're going to put in there. We are once again raising money for vehicles, 4x4 vehicles, to send out to Ukraine as part of Car for Ukraine. That's Ukrainian charity. These vehicles save lives, as many of you will have seen and will see from the insert. We've raised vehicles there that have been destroyed, but they have saved the lives of the servicemen and women who've been driving them. This is incredibly important. So please do check it out. Glenn, welcome back.
Yeah, thank you.
This is a curious inflection point, I think, in the war that we're speaking at. First of all, we have what seems to me, well, we've got the national security policy, which I'm sure we'll touch upon, but we seem to have a very clear point of view of the United States, which they've been flip-flopping between it, or rather giving the impression of moving towards the Ukrainian side, but they always seem to default back to a position which favors Russia, which seems to be putting undue pressure on Ukraine for various reasons, which we can unpack. We are now perhaps in the depth of one of those phases where Trump is talking down Ukraine, talking down Zelensky, and actually repeating not just Russian narratives, but actually going full throttle in strategies that would benefit the Kremlin and which they've wanted for a long time. For instance, forcing elections in wartime on Ukraine, which is illegal and impractical.
I don't have much to that. It's, I mean, goodness knows. Trump has clearly been favoring Russia since the Helsinki meeting during his first term. That Helsinki meeting when he went in without an interpreter, and obviously whatever was agreed between him and Putin at that meeting is now coming to fruition. There is no question about that. And I think that you're saying about the flip-flopping. I'm not so sure it is flip-flopping. I think that Trump has been a consistent pro-Putin lover since since he went into politics. So I don't think there's anything new there. I think that what appears to be flip-flopping is in fact concessions to his own MAGA community and the Congress members who are supporting Ukraine. So I think he stayed consistent throughout, but every so often he's thrown them a few pieces of bread to keep them happy and to stop them actually attacking him publicly. So what we've seen on the surface appears to be flip-flopping, but actually underneath it's a pretty solid game of trash Ukraine, support Russia, and we're seeing that now in its full glory because it's now not just trash Ukraine, it's trash Ukraine, trash Europe, support Russia. And I think that this is actually arguably the most dangerous time that the Western world has had since the Second World War.
Uh,
Um,
that same strategy, as I've been trying to say on the channel, I think, for a long time, that sort of default, if you look at Project 2025, Bannon, and the sort of outbursts of I would say, the architects. So I'm going to be a bit mean here and say that I don't think Trump has the mental capacity, the imagination, or indeed the consistency to actually execute a strategy like this. Yes, he'll default to certain
uh,
narratives he's comfortable
I
with, but the overarching strategy, I don't think he's capable of doing that and bringing that consistency to it. Do you detect the outlines of a far more structured plan, as you've hinted there, to deconstruct the post-war order in
Yes,
favor of
I
authoritarians?
do, I do, and I do, and I've been thinking about it quite quite a lot in the last couple of months, 3 4 months, and looking at all the things that have been, yeah, I'm going to say that have gone before, um, and uh, uh, and it worries me. I mean, clearly Trump is a patsy. He's not running America. There is no way that that man is running America. Um, and I look at some of the people like Rubio and say, well, Rubio is frightened. There's no question about it. Rubio is frightened. Patel is frightened. You can see it in their faces, which tells me that, there is no way they can be frightened of Trump. What they're playing is a game. And there is someone or something behind these people that is actually making this work. And I sat down and I looked back at some of the things, and you think, well, okay, this isn't, I don't believe that what we're seeing here is anything about Republicans versus Democrats. I think that this is oligarch versus the rest. In other words, let's screw the world up and let's make huge amounts of money out of it. And that when you actually look at it like that, then what you're seeing is the rich and powerful, irrespective of where they come from, but the rich and powerful running the world and the future world, the world that goes into space, the world that actually, reaps untold benefits for them, their families, and their future. So it's a going back to how the world was, you could say, in the Middle Ages.
And
Um,
resources that are required there, countries simply become a conduit for the resources
correct,
required to keep
correct.
that
Correct. If
tech
indeed
future.
countries, I mean, because in a way, countries are a recent thing. I mean, if you go back to sort of the old city states, I mean, there weren't really countries when Vienna was, a city state, and Venice was a city state, and they owned bits here and there. So what we've got, this current construct is relatively in history quite recent. And I mean, and you can see that when you actually think that Ukraine was around for, I don't know, 700, 800 years before Moscow even came into being. So it's people wanting to go back to that. Now the question is who? That's the big question. Who actually is driving Trump? Don't tell me it's Bannon, because I don't believe that.
Well,
Um,
Bannon's the guy who articulates the plan because I think he's very good at putting the words together. But yes, as you say, he's not the ultimate beneficiary of this scheme. One wonders about sort of Musk, and well, I've been diving into very conspiratorial holes, and I tend to believe that the Musk has probably been personally managed by Putin because I've said for some time that I'm sure
ah,
he has his cell number
yeah,
programmed into his
and
phone.
I don't think you should call this conspiratorial
Mm.
anymore. I mean, several people said that to me. Oh, Glenn, your conspiracy theories about about Zelensky when he came in and taking money, and now we see it's actually it's true. I think we've got to stick with the facts, and if you stick with the facts and don't look at them as conspiratorial, but actually what is actually happening, then go right back to 9/11. Tell me why the third building went down. Tell me where the engines were, where the engines were on the, attack on the attack on the Pentagon, where the engines from the plane went.
Oh, we're heading into
Yeah,
into
no, we're
dark
heading
territory
we're
there.
heading into dark territory,
Yes,
but we are in dark territory.
yes,
We're in dark territory today.
that's
And
it.
it doesn't matter how you look at it. This is dark. This is nasty.
Yes.
We've got the United States of America has just put out a paper calling their strategy, which trashes Europe. Is that not dark?
Oh, absolutely. I think it's far darker than most analysts are care to. And I'm going to throw an idea, which I threw it at Keir Giles, thinking I'd get a little bit of pushback, but he said it's a simple nope, that's it. But I'll throw that at you in a
Yeah.
minute. The starting point of that theory, though, is that not only have we seen this, again, flip-flopping say is the wrong word, it's simply a tactical appeasement of certain narratives without changing the underlying position in order to keep you as congressman on side, stop him getting incessant attacks about the policy. It's as if to create a little sort of Potemkin policy and be seen to be reasonable, allow people to normalize insane wash by saying things that they want without, as you say, changing his underlying position. It's been my impression
His
for
underlying or someone else's
or
underlying position.
someone else's underlying position,
Because
exactly.
he's not writing the things he's
No,
signing. They're being put on the page on the
of
table
course.
for Trump. He doesn't even know what half of them are because look at the videos and he says, "What's this?"
Yes, he does.
That
Of
is
course,
not
he
a
doesn't know.
president that is in charge.
And he's getting constant reminders on how to get him back on message, clearly. And
Yeah.
those conduits for those messages are interesting. For instance, Orban and so on, and probably some of his family who are in more direct and overt contact with Russian handlers. But it seems to me the same strategy of giving enough material to allow the normalization of the media, the normalization of NATO, I'm going to say as well here. He has been stringing Europe along, making them believe that it is not as bad as they think, and actually forcing them to put huge effort in to try to bring him back on side when that was never a possibility.
Yes.
Is that your impression of
Yes. Completely.
what's been going on the Western
Completely.
side? Yeah.
Completely. Completely. And that's what I've been feeling for probably a couple of years. Um, and yes, and I mean, it's painfully obvious that Russia has infiltrated uh, basically the whole world, probably with the exception of those countries that it finds difficult to infiltrate because of their coherence, like Finland, like China, but like Albania. Um,
Notably, you don't mention the UK in that, but
I
I think
don't.
for
No, I
obvious
mean the
reasons.
UK
Yeah.
has been infiltrated badly.
Yes.
I mean, really, really badly, much worse than people realize. And I think you'll find that, if you dig back to the Boris times, and actually when it started to come to the surface, why did we hide away from the reports on things? The Brexit money coming out of Russia. So, we've been infiltrated, but, Britain is not so fluffy. It's so bouncing around all over the place that people don't actually notice because there's always something else, like football, that they need to take their mind off it.
Yes.
That we've not actually noticed that we've been undermined, and that reform is continuing to undermine without even realizing that that is what it's doing. And people see it as an alternative party without realizing that there are people outside rubbing their hands with glee
Yes.
at the complete mess of the Conservative Party
Yeah.
and the Labour Party.
Yeah. I
Um,
suspect there are individuals in the Reform Project who are either barely aware or
mm,
not even aware at all of what they're doing in that respect. But that, of course, would not apply to those who are bankrolling it, those who provide the
yeah,
technology and the strategy for the sort of digital targeting, the micro targeting. I mean, those in the leadership team, I'm sure, are completely cognizant of whose interests they're working to the benefit of.
yes, yes.
We won't name names because they're very litigious because they have
Yeah, I'm sure they'll come and get you.
oligarchic backers. So
Yeah, who've got
that's
lots
yes,
of money, and that's part
exactly.
of
Yeah,
the problem. That is part of the problem and part of the challenge.
yeah, absolutely.
Um,
I mean, this also means that we have not rearmed in the way that we should. It means we have not behaved as we did in 1938, which is furiously starting to build up sort of navy and land forces and indeed
yeah,
invest in our air capabilities. We have been snoozing. It seems that we have been, dusting off the Storm Shadow production lines in order to keep Ukraine ticking over, which is something, but we have not really taken this as a wake-up call. I have to ask, what on earth, Glenn, will it take for us to actually mobilize our human and technical resources?
Oh, I think a stream of drones across UK, and actually hitting things in the same way that Kiev has been suffering. I think
But that's
until
entirely feasible, isn't it? Whether
and
it's
it is
off
oh,
ghost
everything is
fleet
within
ships
range.
or
Yes,
yeah,
of course,
yeah.
everything's within range now, because that's what they've been working on. So it is feasible. I mean, okay, sinking a battleship maybe in the North Sea or something, but I think, Putin doesn't need to do that at the moment because he's winning by our stupidity and by the fact that people are actually doing his bidding across Europe. So why would he actually attack us when actually Trump is doing his work for him by trying to, writing a document to try and pull away Hungary and Slovakia and Italy and who was the other one? I can't remember. Spain, I think.
Yes, I think it was
From
Spain, Italy, Hungary, Slovakia. Odd
uh,
kind of list there. But the
it was
G5, they also want to create and exclude the largest democratic economies from that. I'm sure if the AfD is voted in Germany, they would let Germany back into that little fascistic
into that
club.
little
But
group.
yes.
Yeah,
Um, and this has been on my mind, and it's interesting you say this phrase "Putin is winning" because I'm cautious about putting that word out there, and I'm going to sort of caveat it, and it's not because of what Ukraine's done. Now, of course, there could have been things that are improved on the Ukrainian side, but actually, overall, they have done an extraordinary effort to hold the Russians at bay. Partly, of course, due to their own bravery, partly, of course, due to the utter incompetence and the
yeah.
brutish nature of the Russian army on the side. But it's not down to us. We have allowed Putin to get into what we could describe as being on top at this point, not just in the battlefield game, which he's sort of really not making that embarks on, but he is winning the strategic and
The
informational
strategic
war.
battle, absolutely. The Ukrainians that I speak to are in despair at this because they're doing their bit. As they said, the attacks and the depth attacks that they're doing are the best sanctions that anybody can put against Russia. They're actually doing it successfully and attacking Russian energy and things successfully. But
And
but
now interdicting ships that are
and
heading
now
towards
interdicting,
Novorossiysk.
which
Yeah.
absolutely they should have been doing from the beginning, but probably didn't have the capacity, but they do now. And that now, whether that capacity is being supported by Europeans under the table, perhaps it is, and perhaps we're shouting too much and there's more going on than we know. Um, and there probably is that, but in a way that's a shame because it doesn't show the rest of Europe and the rest of the world that people are fighting back in support of Ukraine. They're doing it under the table, and that's a pretty cowardly way out at the moment. And it doesn't do anything for Ukrainian morale because they can't see that Europe is supporting them under the table, so to speak. They can only see what's on the surface, and what they see on the surface is a lot of blah blah blah, and not much practical help that's needed.
And of course, what we've done here by essentially attenuating the war, by not causing a rethink in the Kremlin, by not giving them any reason to think that they cannot win ultimately. The Biden policy of escalation management and always balancing things on the sort of knife edge, as we've been doing since the start. It's our fault that we've got to this point, and we're now 4 years in, and we're about to approach. Russia will have been fighting longer than the Great Patriotic War at some point shortly,
Yeah,
which is insane. We've got to the point now where, unfortunately, I think we have pushed Ukraine into the position that they are running out of human resources for, say, infantry battalions. Not necessarily the case for the drone battalions, which, of course, if you're going to join the army, you're going to want to join a non-Soviet, non-sort of punitive and hierarchical structure. You'll want to go to one of the drone battalions where the impact is greater, where they're inflicting 85% of Russian casualties, and where you're going to get an officer who at least gives a damn about your life and your capabilities. So there's this curious kind of imbalance, isn't there,
Yeah,
in the
there is.
forces? That again is partly down to us. We've pushed them into 4, and then it will be 5 and possibly 6 years of war that's taking Ukraine to the very edge of its human capabilities.
Yeah, I mean, one should not uh, one should not put all the blame on some of these things ourselves. I mean, one of the big problems is that Zelensky's human resource policy has been pretty crap, to put it bluntly, and that time after time he's chosen people who are either pro-Russian or pro-Soviet in their way of thinking. And there are new people coming in. There's no question. There's youngsters coming in into various parts of the system. But I often wonder whether that's because he's had to, rather than that's because it's his desire to put someone like that there. I mean, there are too many of his choices have been really, really appalling. And as we've seen one of them has just been made hero of Russia. And when you actually get someone who runs away and gets hero of Russia, you should be asking, what vetting procedures have the security services got for actually checking people that Zelensky chooses to go and take senior appointments.
And there's Mindich and others, of course,
And
which show
Mindich
a
has run away,
poor
and
judgment. Yeah.
there's a large degree of blame has to also go on to Zelensky for not taking the war seriously enough previously, for not, choosing a government of all the talents, which he could have done. I mean, there are many, many fine people out there who are quite capable of taking posts all over the place, especially in diplomacy, where some of the choices have been, I mean, frankly, criminal. They're almost you fail the Zelensky government, and then they give you they give you an ambassadorship as a reward.
Hmm.
Thankfully, in Britain, we've got Zelensky, who is, I can't class him as being one of those one of those failures.
And
But
that's an interesting point, isn't it? Because it seems to me that from some of the commanders I've met, that he was more inclined to appoint people who had, let's say, a more original way of thinking, who were not Soviet and hierarchical. There was a failure to enact, full reform of the army. I'm guessing that's more to do with the executive and legislature than necessarily the army and its pushback. But the failure to reform is one thing. Promotion of people of talent is another. And as I say, from what I've seen, Zaluzhny was appointing people who were bringing about transformations in certain brigades and battalions, but maybe not fast enough.
yeah, not fast enough, and also he was too nice, too nice, and hanging on to quite a few of his old mates. That and maybe not hanging on to them because they were friends, but hanging on to them because the clan that they belonged to was quite strong, and therefore could trash his reforms. And as we've seen since he left, that is actually what has happened. That the Zaluzhny reforms in places that have been trashed, and the old school have stayed and haven't been removed, despite the fact that at this stage of the war, with the failure in many places, they should have been removed for failure. But it seems that Zelensky didn't pick enough strong youngsters on one side, and Zelensky was himself not confident to remove the old school.
Hmm. And
Um,
one wonders whether, Zelensky was really making these decisions or whether Yermak was really, chief HR officer and he was just signing stuff off. It's
well,
difficult to know the dynamic
it's
behind the
difficult to
scenes.
know.
Yeah.
You're absolutely right because because they basically for the last 2 years they've that Yermak and Zelensky have basically uh, locked themselves away in the bank, as the president's administration is known as, and so a lot of people can't actually outside can't actually see what those dynamics are. And I mean, there is a a school of thought that says, that Ermak is actually going back to his Russian roots, and others that it's just all about money. Um, and it certainly has been to a large degree about money, as we see from Mindich running away, who was a partner of Zelensky, running away and is now in Israel, apparently.
Yes, former partner in Kvartal 95 in the
Yeah,
showbiz
yeah,
days. Yeah,
yeah,
not necessarily in governance, but yeah, then the electricity scandal shows that some of those relationships, dotted lines, sort of continued, which is
yeah.
sort of worrying.
Yes, it was a continuous line, not a dotted line.
Yes, that's it. That's it. I mean, Zelensky not implicated personally at this point from the evidence I've seen, and NABU have not made any direct implications against, but many, many figures around him, and I suspect that's just the tip of the iceberg. So we'll have to watch that space.
Yeah,
Let's turn to Russia's tactics, of course, because yes, they have elite drone regiments and battalions, and I think that's important implication for Europe and for the what I'm thinking of as a sort of hybrid Pearl Harbor, which I'm sure
yeah,
Russia is keeping its back pocket for Europe. We'll come to that and what that
yeah,
might look like in a minute. But their broad tactics, as you've pointed out many times, are crude. From meat wave
yeah,
assaults to glide bombs, it is harking back to an extremely crude type of warfare. It's a grind, but
yeah.
unfortunately, that seems to be gaining some momentum,
Well,
despite its horrific
it's a
nature.
resource. It's a resource thing. Is that Russia has geared itself for war, whereas Ukraine hasn't. Now, Zelensky has not put the country on a war footing. So Russia has. So the numbers of drones, the numbers of manpower that they can actually put in the front line, is huge, and they're doing so, and that's why they're moving forward. It's a numbers game. Ukraine has not done that, and Zelensky has not even um, put his energies behind the technology either. So because he's been distracted, whatever he's been doing, we're distracted by perhaps by money, perhaps by the international relations part being more important. Perhaps he even believed that peace was on the table, or he's just being bullied so much by Trump that he doesn't
Yes.
have any choice. But whatever it means, it means that Ukraine has not been managing what it's been doing particularly well. I mean, we know that money's been stolen from the defense ministry under not just one minister, but several. So Ukraine has been the front line in Ukraine has been fighting with one and a half hands behind its back. So it's absolutely amazing that they've done as well as they have done, considering the huge amount of resources being poured into the war by Russia.
Again, we're back to civic society, which has formed the basis of units like Azov and Third Assault Corps. It's
Yeah,
the motivation of individuals and their families and their network in in
yeah,
in bringing expertise and funding to that. And something I didn't understand maybe last year when we spoke was why there's so little communication between some of the more effective and elite regiments and the others. And I saw that as a fault of them. Now I see it as very clearly they're protecting themselves. They're putting a firewall up between themselves so that their cultures, their effective fighting cultures they're developing, are not diluted and corrupted by the more
absolutely.
Soviet-leaning,
Yeah,
officers.
organizations.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. No, absolutely right. Absolutely right. And you can see that as well across very much across the drone units that when they get something that works, then they want to hang on to it and to keep their personal societal link. I mean, don't forget that in many units, the boys are spending their own money on the drones, that they're not actually still being equipped in the way that they should be. And people will tell you that they'll say, "Oh, we're producing this many drones a year," but then when you actually add it up of how many are arriving on the front line, those two figures do not match. They don't match. So
Yeah.
there's things not working as they should be, and people still declaring figures that are actually untruthful, I
Yeah.
think is the right way.
Then there's the effectiveness, which of course Brave One is, I think, an interesting in several ways, not least the gamification of war. And that is essentially gathering real-time data to say not just, how many kills do we get today or etc., but it's which unit is using equipment most effectively, what equipment is being most effective, and in what circumstances, and where is that
Okay.
equipment sourced
But
from.
that but that
So,
that
but
that
that,
that, that gaming is now being proven to be a bit dodgy.
hmm,
Because okay, you give drones to the people who are most effective. Yes, that's a good way of looking at it. But in some units, a large amount of the drone flights are actually logistic, and they're taking food and things forward. So to keep small pockets of soldiers that are holding the line alive. And also then if you gamify this, it's okay. So if you've got Russian attacks in one of the areas where it's large open fields, yeah, you can be pretty successful. If it's Russian attacks in the wooded areas in the north, then the guys don't even see half the things that are coming. So so that gamification has actually slewed the delivery system of drones to the front line. So some people are then can defend better than others who are actually defending quite well, but in a different way, but not using their drones just as FPV killing tanks. Maybe they don't even see any tanks to get any score. So
there's
it's
not too
it's
many left at this point.
there's
It's
not too
yeah.
many left. Yeah,
It's an interesting one though. It's bringing market forces, and I guess it's something hopefully that will be built upon. But also, I met a friend who's got a little drone factory out somewhere in Lviv. Obviously, I won't say where for OPSEC, and he's got a little volunteer team there. They raise funds, etc. And he was showing me a government procured drone, which his friends at the front had showed him, versus the ones that he's producing as part of a private initiative. And yeah, it was like night and day. The civic society developed ones were
mm,
beautifully soldered and put together. The unit they were giving them to was attesting that they were useful in that configuration and they were able to adapt the configurations. The government procured one was well, it looked like it'd been designed by committee and produced in a sort of Soviet type factory. It was a piece of junk, and at this instance, it said it was less effective. I wouldn't say it was useless, but it was less effective.
yeah,
That ability to react with speed and to have a communication going at speed with the network that suggests that only a very let's say distributed network can be responsive in that way. I'd like to get a comment on that, but also the implications for Western
yeah.
procurement systems that do not seem to understand the speed and agility that is required
No,
and the
and
distributed
but
scale of the warfare.
the current procurement methods we've got are still working back in the way that of days gone by. So, people are looking at large numbers. They're looking, let's have 50,000 drones and something like that. But actually, because of the speed of adaptation, that basically a drone can be out of date within a week. Okay, let's be gentle and say 3 weeks. Well, then if you're procuring more than 3 weeks, it means that everything that comes later is out of date. And what these people are doing and what companies are doing is they're collecting like 5,000, putting them in a lorry and driving them. Well, those 5,000 are automatically out of date by the time they get there. When what is needed is business type KPIs working and assuming that a drone is the same as unpasteurized milk. So in other words, it has to be on the shelf by the morning, and it's probably only got a 3-day, 4-day, 5-day shelf life. And if it's not bought by then it's gone. It has to be thrown away because it's rotten. And that means that we have to completely rethink how we're doing it. We've got to have the same business processes as buying milk. Where the lorry goes around overnight and it picks the stuff up and it's on the shelf by 2 o'clock in the afternoon latest.
The implications are huge, though. It suggests
Yes,
that
of course
the
yeah.
the money needs to go into a testing environment because you don't need, if we're not in a direct war, we don't need to be producing bulk of drones, but we need a production line capable of churning them out. It suggests that the bulk of investment needs to go into an agile testing environment where people are constantly racing and testing drones and EW against each other to simulate that sort of
Yes,
wartime
yes,
accelerated
yes,
experience.
Yes, and it changes how we look. So instead of going on exercise where we are thinking about how wonderful we are and putting videos out about what excellent job we're doing, we have to concentrate on what the enemy can do. And therefore our enemy force that we have, for NATO, for fighting for against UK troops, has got to be 10 times better than the ones that we look at the moment. The 7 men attack team is of no that comes once a night and attacks you in your trenches is of no use. We've now got to have something that is totally and utterly uh, technical and clever and good. So we need to spend, we need to look at our defense spending and say that, maybe 5 to 10% of our defense spending has got to be on our enemy force to fight ourselves. Otherwise, the 90% we spend on ourselves, I'm afraid, is going to be wasted because we're not actually thinking about how to deal with all the unmanned systems. And it's not just, let's not call it drones, let's call it unmanned systems. That the unmanned systems world is leaping forward faster than our military can leap behind it because we're not really thinking about the enemy
Indeed,
enough.
someone I met yesterday, who of course won't be named, said they were looking at the course modules at Sandhurst, and there's not a single mention
Look,
of
I've
drones
been
in
saying this.
there.
I've even written to Sandhurst a couple of times and actually pointed out that what I'm looking at is so far out of date, we might as well be thin red line. And I see their videos and they embarrass me as an officer. That just means that people are not keeping up to date and not thinking about what they're doing at all. It's smug. I call it. I was in a conference in Poland. I must finish with this because I have to
Yes.
go. I was in a conference in Poland 2 weeks ago, and I called it military arrogance.
Mm.
And I said that, our greatest concern, my greatest concern, is that the military arrogance is the thing that is actually destroying our ability for the next war.
The phrase
Um,
Agincourt comes up, the idea that old world tech and behaviors would be slaughtered against new methodologies.
yeah, yeah. On that note, sir, I think I must go.
You must go. It's been a pleasure. I hope that gives people food for thought. I look forward to the next time. Glenn, a real pleasure speaking to you.
Thank you very much, sir. Okay.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. See you
Bye.
soon.
Many of you generously contributed to buying a truck, a 4x4 vehicle for the armed forces of Ukraine in our recent marathon fundraiser for Car for Ukraine. That vehicle was delivered thanks to your generosity and refitted in Lviv with life-saving reinforcements, the doors, windows, and the engine area. That vehicle was destroyed a few weeks after it was delivered at the front in a drone attack. All 3 servicemen survived with only minor scratches and concussion. Your generosity in funding the vehicle was instrumental in saving the lives of all 3 Ukrainian soldiers. Now we are launching our Christmas Tree Trucks 2025 campaign. The goal is to raise €11,000. So please help us buy another vehicle for one of the most effective Ukrainian brigades on the 4th Christmas of Ukraine's epic fight for survival against an imperialistic and genocidal neighbouring state. Help us celebrate the heroism of the soldiers who have held the line against all the odds, who fight for their freedom and pay a terrible price, while also, incidentally, protecting the freedoms of Europe.